Hi, I'm Rob Calori, Director of Information Technology at Westchester Library System, and today I'm going to talk to you about the risks online to patron privacy and what libraries and library systems can do to both educate the patrons about those risks and help them mitigate those risks when engaging online. Before we get started, you should know that if you want to print all of these slides, a link to the PDF of all of the slides is located in the comment area of this video. Also, throughout the presentation, I discuss many links to websites and tools that you can use. Links to all of the resources that are mentioned throughout this presentation are included on the last slide. A little bit about me and Westchester Library System. Westchester Library System is a cooperative library system made up of 38 independent member libraries with 44 total locations, all serving the 920,000 residents of Westchester County. I've been working at Westchester Library System for the last 10 years. I currently have a master's in information systems from Pace University and are currently a student at SUNY Albany, where I'm pursuing my library science degree. If you're watching this video, you're clearly already privacy minded, and you care that when a patron walks into a library, that they have the reasonable assurance that the library is trying to protect their privacy as well. Why care about privacy at all? Some would argue that if you have nothing to hide or you're not doing anything wrong, well, then privacy isn't an issue for you. Edward Snowden, who's an arguably controversial figure, said that arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. He goes on in that interview, when you say I have nothing to hide, you're saying I don't care about this right. You're saying I don't have this right because I've got to the point where I have to justify it. The way rights work is the government has to justify its intrusion into your rights. What Snowden is saying there is, just like free speech, privacy is a right. It's something that's guaranteed to each and every one of us. The government can't trivialize it or trample on it just because it makes their job easier. They have to work within the laws and work within protecting our rights to do their job. Nobody wants the government not to do their job. Nobody wants the government not to do the right thing or to keep us safe. However, they have to do so at the same time, making sure that our individual rights are secured. For our agenda today, we're going to talk about various digital environments and the risks to privacy within those environments. And then we're going to talk about the tools and methodologies that can be used to make sure that you're safeguarding your privacy when you're engaging online in these environments. Not just for yourselves, not just for library staff, but also to provide that digital literacy training for patrons to make sure that they're not only aware of the risks, but aware of the tools and methodologies that they can use to mitigate the risks to their privacy when engaging online. Before we get into the risks associated with cloud systems, I think we need to first take a step to acknowledge that there are different kinds of clouds. There are both public clouds and private clouds, and we're actually going to talk about both of them. We should acknowledge that there are risks in both private and public cloud infrastructures. Neither is immune. We're going to discuss not only the difference between public and private clouds and the risks associated with each of them, but also about developing what's called cloud strategy. You have to weigh the risks and the benefits for every different kind of system that you may or may not engage with in the cloud, and make a decision for yourself about whether or not building your own private cloud has enough benefits to outweigh the risks versus going to a public cloud service. Both are good, both have risks. So here are some facts about the cloud. One, there is no magical cloud. When most people refer to the cloud, they're talking about public cloud services. Services like Google Drive and Google Cloud Platform and Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services. These are the public clouds that people refer to, and there is no magic cloud. Public clouds are simply servers that you can't see or touch or control. And like I said, there are two kinds of clouds. There's the public cloud and the private cloud. The only difference between the public cloud and the private cloud is the private cloud is made up of servers that you can touch and can see and can control, and more importantly, have control over what is done with the data that lives on those servers. And just because it's a private cloud and you can't touch the server, that can exist. When you have an environment, for example, like in a library system or a BOCES, where the library system or the BOCES is the one managing the server for you, you might not be able to actually touch the server, but you have given that role to somebody that you have reasonable assurance and trust that they are doing the things on those servers that only you have authorized, that you have agreed to, and that you're fully aware of. Here's a visualization of how a public cloud service is structured. You have PCs on the left, and then through the internet, they connect to some public cloud service. Again, public cloud service, so you can't see or touch the servers. You don't know how it's maintained, if it has viruses, or if it's been maintained with up-to-date patches and updates. You don't know what they're doing with your data. Are they selling or sharing the data? Are they using the data to build a marketing profile about you or people that fit into your profile? Are they doing facial recognition on the people in your photos? Details about this are usually buried in the 100-page end-user license agreement you clicked OK to when you first started using the service. And I'm sure you read it completely before you agreed. But just in case, go read through them again. You may see sentences that sound something like, "You grant the service an unlimited irrevocable license to all the content uploaded to the service." Or something like, "By accessing our service, you agree that we can collect and use such content and information." Now, not all services have agreements like these, but some do. These are things you need to read and consider when electing to use a cloud service. There's nothing wrong with it, but you need to be making a conscious decision about what you're signing up for. The private cloud is a little different, where you have PCs connected to servers through some kind of internal or private connection. In some library systems, all of the libraries are on one wide area network or connected through VPNs. You may have dark or managed fiber. There's all different kinds of ways to have a private internal network spread across a geographic area. The difference here is that the servers are inside the network. They are controlled by you or your partner organization, your library system or a partner library or a BOCES or a local school district. And while you may not be able to touch the servers, or you may, based on the scenario, you know that the people that are administering those servers are doing so with the equivalent ethical treatment that you would give your own servers. That they are not mining or selling information, doing facial recognition, or any other kind of algorithmic analysis on the data on there. It's being held in trust for you, just as a bank holds your money. So let's talk about cloud strategy. Now that I've completely demonized cloud infrastructure, there is a place where the public cloud might be a more appropriate solution for you. You have to weigh the risks, the costs, and the benefits of build versus buy. Build being the private cloud scenario, buy being the public cloud scenario. Private cloud services need to function as reliably as public competitors. Public cloud services are awesome. They're always available. They never go down. You never lose files. It happens, but very rarely. These services are as rock solid gets. Well, if you're going to compete with them, and it truly is competition, if you're going to create a private cloud environment that's going to rival the public cloud, you need to make sure that not only is the performance equivalent or better and the capacity equivalent or better, but that it also has equal or better security. Because what happens is when it doesn't, users will seek alternative in those bad or failure conditions. If your file server constantly tells them that they don't have enough space and it takes forever to download a file out of it, well, they're going to run to Dropbox or Google Drive or some other file management system that will work for them whenever and wherever they want. So be prepared of the fact that you're going to have to build a system that runs as well as those public systems. Systems like that cost a lot of money, and so if you're going to dive into the build environment of a public cloud for a particular service, make sure that you can do so to the extent that it will work as well as the commercial alternative. And just because you want a public cloud, just because you want a private cloud doesn't mean you have to do it all on your own. Seek partners and cost-sharing opportunities. Library systems, school districts, BOCES, and other libraries are excellent partners to consider joining forces with. They share your ethical values, they share your need for privacy, and more importantly, they need to do the same things that you need to do. So they all have file server needs, they all have virtual desktop needs. If you can partner with a district and share the costs so that you gain the economies of scale, maybe building versus buying becomes a more financially sound opportunity. So let's talk about email. Again, I put 3 facts about email that you need to be concerned with. When you're emailing, you have to understand that you're not having a private conversation one-on-one. You're having a conversation in Grand Central Station where almost anybody can listen. Email and their subject lines and the body of your text are all sent in plain text as insecure data over the web. Even if your connection to your service is secure, inter-service communication is not. And what do I mean by that? So if you are a Gmail user and you email another Gmail user, your email didn't have to traverse the public web. It stayed within Google's infrastructure, and chances are that the only person that read that email other than you and your sender is Google. However, if you're a Gmail user and you wanted to send an email to somebody that uses Hotmail, Google needs to exchange that email with Hotmail or Microsoft. And to do so, those servers need to communicate with each other over the public web. Email doesn't get sent encrypted. It doesn't get sent in a secure way. All of your text is traversing the internet in plain text. We're going to talk about what you can do to mitigate some of those risks in the next slide. But the third fact I want to tell you about is that email addresses can be spoofed. There is no such thing as a verified sender. So when you get an email from robc@wlsmail.org, which is my email address, well, sure, that could be from me, but that could also be from somebody that wanted to go online and pose as me. You need to be aware of the fact that I could easily go online and send you an email from trump@whitehouse.gov. It's not hard, and it's very easy to do, and it's because of the fact that email can be spoofed. There are no such things as verified senders. The servers don't talk back and forth to each other in a way that's secure enough to say when you get an email from somebody that you can know with certainty that it's from that person. So let's talk about the issues with securing email. You can't mask who you email. If I send an email to John, John is going to know that I sent him an email, but also so is my service provider and everybody that saw that email every step along the way. You can't mask who emails you. If Jane sends me an email, everybody's going to see that Jane sent me that email. You can't mask a subject. While later we're going to talk about ways to encrypt the messages, the message can be encrypted, but the subject line is always exposed. So you need to be careful about not putting any revealing information in a subject line. Wouldn't be wise to say your password's in this email or the password is XYZ in the subject. You want to make sure that your subject lines are benign enough that they don't give away any information, but descriptive enough that the receiver is going to be able to tell what's in the email before they open it, because one of the things we're also going to talk about is how to be a little more discreet about what emails you choose to open and not. Email addresses can be faked. Like I said in the last slide, I can easily go online and send you an email from trump@whitehouse.gov. I can send you an email from collections@irs.gov. You need to know that and start to think critically when you're working through your emails about what you're going to open, what attachments you're going to look at, if at all, and how to really manage your email in a more thoughtful way. Email messages can contain viruses, not only in attachments, but also in links. You have to be very much aware of what you're clicking on when you're reading your email. It's not a passive experience anymore. Email is a huge risk. There are solutions to most of these problems. When we talk about how email is exposed and traverses the internet in plain text when inter-service emails are sent, you can encrypt your messages. You can encrypt the body of your email in what's called an encrypted text. There's a tool called GPG, and tech people are awesome at naming things. GPG stands for the GNU Privacy Guard, and there's a tool that lets you implement GPG, which is an encryption method, called PGP, which also stands for Pretty Good Privacy. You can use these tools in unison to take plain text and encrypt it with a key that nobody else can open except for the receiver, the intended receiver, and when it traverses the internet, it does so as complete jumbled up mess. Nobody can tell what's inside of it. There are also anonymous email systems. If you want to send a message from John to Jane, and you don't want John or anybody else to see that John sent an email to Jane or that Jane received an email from John, pick up the phone and say, I'm going to send you an anonymous email to this inbox. Just be there to receive it. There's a service called Yop Mail. You can send email to an inbox in Yop Mail and receive it anonymously. The thing to be aware of with Yop Mail is that it's completely publicly exposed. So if you're going to send it, make sure you're sending encrypted things or completely benign things. You don't want anything to be seen there that you don't want everybody in the world to see. There are anti-spam and antivirus systems for private email servers. So many of us use cloud-based email servers like Gmail or MSN or Hotmail or Yahoo Mail. Those are all public cloud email systems. Some of us run internal email servers. If you do, you want to make sure that you're using anti-spam and antivirus to scan those emails before your users get to them. There are many great services out there, both cloud-based and on-premise device-based. But the most safest way that you can protect your privacy and protect yourselves when engaging with email is simply be judicious with what you open. If you get an email from anybody and it says, open me, click here, that's going in the trash. If you get an email from your cousin John that says, I need money, click here and send me money, you're not going to want to click that. If you see a PDF attached, PDFs can contain links to sites that you might not be aware of where you're going. That link could just as easily take you to a site that's going to download a virus and put ransomware on your computer. Simply be judicious with what you open. And one rule of thumb I always like to remember is this. A 1-minute phone call will save you days of heartache. When you're going through your email, and I've said it 3 times now, be judicious about what you open. If you get an email from somebody and it looks suspicious to you, pick up the phone and call them. Call John, call Jane, and say, hey, I just got your email. Before I click on this PDF, what's in it? Before I go to this link, where does it take me? Because if they turn around and say, well, wait, I didn't send you any email with a link in it, that's your first clue that that's probably a spoofed email sent by a hacker or a robot trying to get you to get tricked into downloading their virus or their malware or give away some information in a phishing form. Always take a minute to phone call somebody and say, hey, did you do this? And maybe they'll tell you yes, and maybe they'll tell you no. But either way, you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble by simply making a phone call. I already mentioned some email tools. I want to go into a little deeper onto each of them. Yop Mail, as I told you, is a anonymous email service. Again, IT people love naming things with simple names. Yop stands for your own protection. It's disposable email. So you send an email to I don't care at yop.com, or I'm sorry, yopmail.com. You can go to yopmail.com, type in that email address, and you have access to that inbox. The thing to keep in mind is that everybody has access to that inbox. So if you're going to send a message, make sure it's encrypted or protected or just benign. If you're just trying to mask who you're sending from and who you're sending to, this is a great way to do it. It's like the public bulletin board at a conference. Yoke Mail purges the contents of email boxes every 8 days. So it's, about a week's use. There are no passwords and it's totally anonymous, and you can only send mail to other Yoke accounts anonymously. You can't send out messages to other people from there. There are services for that too, and because they're used almost entirely for nefarious purposes, we won't discuss them. The most important thing to remember is to encrypt sensitive messages. So you've heard me say encrypt a lot. Well, how do we encrypt? How does this encryption thing work? Everybody talks about encryption, but nobody tells me how to do it. Well, there are two tools. One is a standard and one is an actual piece of software. PGP is the standard. It stands for Pretty Good Privacy. And GPG, the GNU Privacy Guard, is open source software that you can use to use PGP encryption on anything you'd like. How does it work? Well, imagine a lock that has two keys. One key can lock the lock and one key can open the lock. And those are the only two keys that this lock works with, and those are the only things that those keys for those locks can do. Well, that's the way PGP works. When you generate a PGP encryption key, you generate actually two keys, a public key and a private key. The public key you share with the world. You can put it on a public key server like MIT's widely used pgp.mit.edu, where people who use PGP encryption post their public keys for everybody in the world to have access to. And what happens is say you want to send me an email. You'll go to MIT's PGP public key server, you'll search for Rob Calori, and you'll find my public key. You'll download my public key and use GPG to encrypt a message to me. And when you send it to me, you can rest assured that that gobbledygook, jumbled up, encrypted message that you sent me can only be opened by me with my private key. So the public key is the key that locks the lock. And my private key, which I protect with my life, is my unlock key. Nobody will have access to my private key. It's protected with a very, very secure password, and I treat it as importantly as I treat everything that has a password on it. There are tools for ease of use. In the beginning of PGP, it was very difficult to use. Now for Windows, there are great tools that you can download from PGP for Win, called GPA and Cleopatra, and they all work very, very easily. By the way, links to all of the tools that I'm mentioning throughout this presentation are on the last slide. So hearing about how PGP works sounds confusing. So I have this visualization here to help us better understand how PGP works when you're sending somebody information. So all the way over on the left, we have a yellow circle with personal information in it. This is information that somebody wants to send to me. So what do? They go to that MIT server and they download my PGP public key, or they had it some other way that I gave it to them, and they go ahead and they lock that information up with my public key. And when they do, it comes out looking like this. Jumbled, gobbledygook. No one that sees that info in transit will know what it is. It's completely jumbled. And they will see it, but they won't know what it is. It's encrypted with that PGP public key. Then you send it to me somehow, whether on a flash drive or email or CD or some way that when I get it, I know that it's locked. It says that it's locked with a PGP public key, that it's my public key, and that I need my private key to unlock it. So I go ahead and I type in my password with my PGP private key, and I unlock that information. And when I do, I end up with the personal information. The same thing that was in the yellow circle on the left now reappears in the yellow circle on the right, unlocked with my private key. That's how PGP works. It makes it so that the file in transit or the data in transit is not useful to anybody or readable by anybody that sees it. This tool, PGP, is not just good for email. It's good for FTP. It's good for putting things on flash drives. It's good for putting things on CD-ROMs. When you put something on disposable media like a flash drive or a CD-ROM, you need to think to yourself, if I were to lose this thing, what am I giving away? Do you keep all of your passwords in an Excel spreadsheet on a thumb drive? If it's not encrypted, and you lose that flash drive, you just gave somebody all of your passwords to all of your sites. Maybe you just have your alarm code to your house or an account number to your bank, but you have to think to yourself, when you put something on portable media, don't just think about how you're going to use it. Think about how somebody else might use it should you lose that media and someone else finds it. Save yourself a lot of trouble. Make sure it's encrypted, not just password protected with Excel or Microsoft Word's password protection. That doesn't encrypt the file. That's breakable. Use PGP public, your PGP private key, and lock it up. Make sure that anybody that finds it is going to say, this is garbage and I can't use it. So now that we've talked about the risks associated with email and why we have to be careful about what we click or download out of an email, and we've also talked about how PGP works, how encryption works, how key encryption works, that's a perfect segue into talking about the biggest risk virus-wise that's out there, which is ransomware. Ransomware is a virus that when it gets onto your computer, it immediately starts encrypting all of your files. Encryption, PGP. Oh, I have my key and I can unlock it. Well, ransomware is a virus that locks all of your files up with a key that you don't have. It's their key. And only the people that wrote the ransomware virus have the power to unlock your files. And as they lock up your files, they delete the originals. So there's no way around it. There's no going back. It looks for all of the best, most important files, your pictures, your documents, your spreadsheets, all of the things that your computer doesn't need to run, but that you need for your life, and it locks them up and throws away the key. The second thing to remember about ransomware is that be proactive. Think before you click. That file that you downloaded from a website or maybe got through an email, that file that kicked off that ransomware virus could be easily avoided by simply not clicking on things that you're not assured came from a safe place. But even the most judicious of people, or paranoid as the case may be, such as myself, we make mistakes. You're not a fool if you get taken by ransomware. These viruses are becoming more and more pervasive. The hackers that develop them are getting more and more effective at getting them out there in places where people might accidentally download them. The way around it all is to make sure that you're protected before then. Make your PC disposable. Have backups. Make sure that if a virus gets on your computer that locks up every file and holds it for ransom, that it doesn't matter. You can throw the whole PC away and you don't lose any of your files. And to do that, you have to have backups. The most important thing about backups from a ransomware perspective is that it's not live attached storage. There's nothing wrong with using an external hard drive as your backup mechanism, but do not leave it plugged into your computer all of the time, because these ransomware viruses also have a tendency to find those backup files and lock up them too. But if the drive is detached, it's not at risk. So then if you get that ransomware virus, you can format your PC and start from scratch, restore from the backup on your external hard drive, and you're back up and running, and you don't have to pay the ransom. So now that we've talked about all of these things on which we're going to put passwords, like our cloud systems and our email and our PGP private keys, let's take a moment to talk about what a good password is and what a good password is not. Multi-term, multi-word passwords are better than single complicated ones. I give two examples here: correct horse battery staple, 4 words all linked together with no spaces, versus library, where the capital L, the L is capitalized, and I replace the I with a 1 and the A with an @ sign, and I put a random uppercase R in there and an exclamation point at the end. And some people would say, hey, that's a great password. You've got letters and numbers and lowercase and uppercase and special symbols. And to a hacker who wrote a hacker that wrote a script trying to break your password, that is just as easily broken as the word library all lowercase. And it's because everybody now knows that we use 1s to replace I's and @ signs to replace A's and 3s to replace E's and 5s to replace S's, and that we put exclamation points at the end of everything. That's just as easily guessed as a dictionary word, and you might as well consider it a dictionary word. A better password would be correct horse battery staple. Don't use those 4 words specifically, but a 4 random word term such as that is a much more effective password. And in the next slide, we're going to talk about why. But keep in mind that attackers can guess a dictionary term with numbers and letters and symbols replacement. Correct horse battery staple is an example, a widely used example, which is why you would never use those 4 words as a password, of diceware passwords, where you create a string of terms that have no meaning or connection to each other or to you. They're completely random terms. What it creates is a single term that by itself is not a dictionary word and is longer than most passwords and is not easily guessed. Non-dictionary terms are stronger. So slang terms are dictionary terms. Using your favorite 4-letter word as part of your password, not random and not non-dictionary. Keep that in mind as well. So to talk more about where correct horse battery staple came from, there is a comic. It's an online comic at xkcd.com. It's a comic for people. It's a smart comic. It's smart and funny. They came out with this comic several years ago, this strip, where they talked about password strength, and they were mocking how a lot of systems require these complicated passwords, yet they're not very effective at protecting systems. And they give this example, the first pane, where they write the word troubadour with all of the common replacements. It's an uncommon, non-gibberish base word that has cap substitutions and number substitutions and a punctuation and a number at the end. And they say, oh, that's a great password because it's so complicated. Well, just because it's hard for a person to remember doesn't make it necessarily hard for a computer to guess. The example there of troubadour with all the replacements has 28 bits of entropy. Some people might be asking, what is entropy? Entropy is basically the measure of randomness in a system, in this case a password. So this password has 28 bits of entropy, and a computer doing a brute force attack at 1,000 guesses a second will guess that password in about 3 days. And then you're thinking to yourself, how did I write that password? What number did I substitute for 0 or O, or did I make the T or the R an uppercase letter? I forget. So you have this password that is completely ineffective at protecting anything because it can be easily guessed by a computer and you can't remember it half the time anyway. Then we have the correct horse battery staple example. And correct horse battery staple is 4 random words. They're not related to each other or you in any way. For example, the 4 names of the people in your house, probably not a good password because it's not random. These words are completely random. They were chosen by diceware. They were chosen by rolling dice, getting numbers, and then looking up that number in a word list and doing that 4 times until you have 4 random words. This password has 44 bits of entropy, almost double the entropy of the original term. This password would take the same computer 550 years instead of 3 days to guess in a brute force attack, and it's something very easy for you to remember. Oh, correct horse battery staple, 4 random terms, all lowercase. If you want to learn more about correct horse battery staple, visit xkcd.com or do a Google search on diceware. You can either use a diceware site that will give you 4 random dictionary words, or you can actually learn how to pull 4 random words off of a word list that you create. Either way you do it, the important thing is that you'll have a nice long password that's easy to remember and that you can use to protect the most important services that you have, such as your cloud services or your private servers or your PGP private key. We all know there are risks to using the web. Here are some things you absolutely need to know and keep in your mind. Your ISP, or your internet service provider, this is the people that provide you your cable modem or your fiber service. They can see and log every URL you visit. They know how many times you went to Amazon and when. They know that you shop in the morning before you go to work and not at night when you come home. They know that you spend 3 hours watching Netflix last night, and they can do whatever they want with that information. There's even more things they can do, as the protections of net neutrality are at risk and may or may not disappear in the future. And we'll talk about that on another slide. But every website also knows that you visited them. They can track your IP address. IPs, while not directly tied to you, may give away your approximate location. And another thing to remember is that don't get lulled into a false sense of security with an HTTPS site. Everybody knows that HTTPS is an encrypted website where all of the information between you and the server is completely encrypted. And that's great. Make sure your banks are using HTTPS. Make sure your email is using that. Make sure any website where you're going to do any kind of personal information exchange is using that HTTPS, or SSL is actually the technology. HTTPS is just the browser protocol. Make sure it's using that. But that only protects the page and the data on the page. It doesn't protect the address of the page. And a lot of things get exposed or can be exposed in the URL of a page. So if you go to Amazon.com, for example, and do a search, every URL actually is a link to the product that you're viewing. So your ISP has a log of every item you looked at the details on Amazon.com. A lot of library catalogs work that way too. A lot of catalogs used what's called a RESTful URL for their search. So all of your search terms are exposed in the URL. So even if your catalog is secure, the URLs are not, and be aware of that. There are ways to protect even the URLs, to go beyond HTTPS or SSL and protect your entire browsing session. And that's through the use of a browser called Tor browser. Tor is a network of relays that are only accessible through a very specific browser called the Tor browser, and allow you to browse the web freely and anonymously. So here's a visualization about how Tor works. We're going to use this to step through the entire Tor process so that we have a better understanding about what happens when Tor browser does its job. So on the box on the left is you. You want to visit a website. And the website you want to visit is the box all the way on the right, the yellow box that says website. And in today's example, we're going to go to librarytrustees.org, the website for LTA. And this is a website I recommend you visit on a regular basis for all kinds of good information. It's a fabulous organization. So today we're going to say, Tor browser, I want to go to librarytrustees.org. And your Tor browser creates an encrypted little package that nobody else can read and says, hey, I need to send this to an entrance relay. And it finds an entrance relay and it says, I am your entrance. Send me your encrypted request. And your browser says, hey, I have this thing. It needs an exit. Can you find it in exit? It's for Rob. Okay. And the entrance relay says, all right, I'll keep track of this package for you. It's for Rob. He's a good guy. We're going to send this on to him. But it doesn't know where you want to go. It only knows you. And your entrance relay then says to the Tor network, hey, I need a middle relay. I need a handoff guy. And it finds a middle relay. And the middle relay says, hey, I know how to find exits. Send me the encrypted package. I'll keep track of the entrance it came out of, and I'll pass it back to you when I get it back. Great, here it is. And the middle relay calls out and says, hey, I only know the entrance and the exit. I don't know who this is for, and I don't know where it's going. All I know is I got this thing from an entrance, and I need an exit. And it turns around and says, hey, I got this exit over here. Hey, exit, can you decrypt this message to see where it's got to go? Just enough to see where it's got to go, get it and hand it back to me. And it says, yeah, I can do that. Oh, you want to go to librarytrustees.org. I don't know what entrance it came out of, and I don't care who it's for, but I'll go get librarytrustees.org for you. And it goes out and it gets librarytrustees.org. And then once it gets it, it reroutes it all the way back through this entire process back to you. The thing to remember of what it does here is that it's keeping you completely anonymous. Every step along the way, you have not been tracked. The only person that knows who you are is the entrance relay, and the only person that knows where you wanted to go was the exit relay, and everything in between has anonymized you to the point where you're not traceable. This is how Tor works, and it is completely dependent on this network of relays in order to function. And so the first thing you got to ask yourself is, who runs these relays, and can they see what's going on? And the answer is, the relays are operated by a network of volunteers, libraries and individuals and universities and people who are privacy minded like you and I, who care about privacy. Could a corporation stand up a Tor relay? Sure. Can they see what's going on inside of it? No. That's not the way Tor works. And that's the way it's going to stay, because Tor is completely minded around making sure that this does not get corrupted by corporate greed. So, can a library stand up a Tor relay? Absolutely. Can a library system stand up a Tor relay? Absolutely. If you're on a shared network, talk to your network administrator. If you're a library part of a library system network, talk to your system. Many libraries are getting involved in the project, and if you're going to use Tor browser, I like to advocate that it's good to contribute back to the community that is providing you a service. Tor is a completely free service, but is only supported through the generosity of volunteers. Volunteers that will either stand up a relay and help support the network, or make a donation towards the things that they need to do. I highly recommend you read deeper into Tor Project. There's a link to Tor Project at the end. And the only place that it is safe to download the Tor browser or the information for setting up a Tor relay is from torproject.org. Do not download anything from any other site other than torproject.org. At this point, you have to be asking yourself, why does any of this even matter? I've been browsing the internet unprotected for years. Why does it matter? Well, websites and ISPs collect information to build marketing profiles. We are all creatures of habit, myself included, and there's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is when companies collect data and they mine that data for usage information and use it to figure out who looks at what and when, or who makes a purchase after looking at certain pages or ads, and they sell this data or use it for themselves to target you. This is why when you do a search for an airplane tickets to Miami, and then you go to a hotel site and they're already showing you deals for hotels in Miami. When your mom told you there's no such thing as a free lunch, it wasn't just an expression. She wasn't kidding around. Nothing online is free. The difference online is that there's a different currency. Instead of cash, you pay for, quote, free services with your personal information currency. You pay for these free services with your private information. Be aware of what you buy with your personal information currency, just as you would with cash. When you go to a news site, for example, you're going to see ads. These ads are tracking all sorts of things about your activity. How long you read an article, how deep you scrolled, what you clicked off when you exited the site, and so on. All of that information about you is saved. It's cataloged and funnels into these massive profiles that are not only used to target you individually, but also as part of groups. You might be grouped into a parent group or a lifestyle group or an age group, or people who like to travel to certain destinations, and so on and so on and so forth. Things based on the activity that you engage in online. If you use Tor browser, you are greatly reducing the amount of data that can be collected about you because you become anonymous. There's nothing wrong with engaging in free services. There's nothing wrong with going to a free web page that has ads. There's nothing wrong with having a web page that's supported by ads. What is wrong is doing so without regard for or knowledge about what you are giving away. And you should and need to be 100% on board with what you're giving away. There's absolutely nothing wrong with giving away all of your private information. I don't recommend it. In fact, I recommend strongly against it. But if that's the way you choose to live your life, nobody should judge you for that. And it should be a choice that you make consciously and not something that's done subversively by some corporation without your knowledge or consent. While we are talking about the web, let's take a moment to discuss net neutrality. Net neutrality has been in the news a lot lately because there is a movement in Washington to dismantle the net neutrality regulations. This would allow ISPs to basically make the internet a pay-to-play paradise. Net neutrality is an ideology, and it says that all data is to be treated the same, and right now, that is on the books as FCC rules. ISPs cannot tell Netflix, for example, that if you don't pay us, we will cut your bandwidth to your customers. They can't say that unless you give us $100 million, you're out. It's against the rules. There is no pay to play on the net. All of the data, whether it's from a huge corporation or an itty-bitty little nonprofit, is all the same. They are not allowed to block or throttle based on an organization's ability to pay. What the end of net neutrality means is really an end to social equality online. The pay-to-play that happens after the fall of net neutrality would be discrimination within the information society. We would immediately develop classes of haves and have-nots, where organizations who can't pay the ISPs may or may not even be available to their customers, or their sites will operate so slowly that no one will want to use them. So what does this mean for libraries? Libraries would end up having to pay to get their services to stream through certain ISPs. Our third-party vendors would have to do the same. And that means our third-party services would become even more expensive, and our websites will become even more expensive to operate. In a world where library funding is under attack every single day, it means the end of information freedom for libraries. It means that some libraries are not going to be able to pay or afford the service fees in order to have their information freely available on the web. It's wrong, it's unethical, and it's the social equivalent of government-authorized censorship. We need to do something about it. Net neutrality was saved in 2015 because the public and corporations that care about this came out in hordes and spoke up. The time to speak up is now. You need to call or write your representatives at every level of government and make sure that the internet is kept open for all ideas and not just those with money behind them. So what can libraries do? Well, first, we talked about a lot of tools today. We talked about a lot of protocols and things that you can use online to protect email and the web and passwords and all this stuff. Install privacy tools for library patrons and staff. Don't just put it on your public PCs. Put Tor browser on all your PCs. Put GPA, the GNU Privacy Assistant, on all your PCs. Libraries are great at offering programming. Every time I go to a library, I'm blown away by the absolute wealth of free education that's available through libraries. Please consider adding privacy or digital literacy education to your offerings for your programs. If you already have some of these, I applaud you. Please consider expanding them to include some of the topics we've spoken about today. Host community conversations about privacy. Installing Tor browser is a little bit of a controversial move. It's not something that you should take lightly. It's something that you should discuss. And before you do it, maybe host a community conversation and hear what your public has to say about it. Maybe you'll move forward, maybe you won't. But best to have your community on board, or at least your board. Write and call your representatives. This is your most effective way to get your voice heard in Washington. Call your state, local, and federal representatives. Make sure they know how you stand. If you support them, they'll support you. And it's important to make sure that you advocate for your wants and needs to them just as much as the lobbyists are doing for the corporations that want to totally take advantage of us by ending things like net neutrality. Also, support the communities that support you. If you're going to use Tor browser, consider starting a Tor relay and give back. If you don't want to set up a Tor relay, which is a big step, consider a donation or to Tor or to the other open source projects that we use. Libraries use or can use a lot of different open source projects to support their organization. If you can't contribute back to it through sweat equity, like programming or setting up a relay or anything like that, consider a cash donation. But keep in mind that donations can be non-cash. If you have IT staff that are coders, maybe you give them a couple hours a month towards working on an open source project where code can be contributed back to the project. Sometimes those non-cash donations end up being more valuable to the project than cash could be. As promised, this slide contains links to all of the tools and websites mentioned during this presentation. The first link is obviously Westchester Library System. The second is Yopemail, as you'll recall is the anonymous email service. GPG for Win is the Windows version of the GPG tools for using PGP encryption. only download these tools from gpgforwin.org. Then there's the GPG for Linux, the original GPG website, which is gnupg.org. The MIT PGP public key server, where you would post your public key, which is pgp.mit.edu. The XKCD password comic strip, which is xkcd.com/936. And of course, Tor browser, which is at torproject.org. Again, only download Tor browser from torproject.org. There's lots of other sites that attempt to host it. They are hacked with all kinds of malware. Do not download it from anywhere else but torproject.org. Finally, I want to thank you. Thank you for being so concerned about security and privacy-minded that you took the time to watch this video. I encourage you to take the things that I've spoken about here and have conversations with your board and your library community about how some or all of these tools might help your patrons and your staff be more digitally literate about the risks online, the risks to your security, the risks to your privacy. Please feel free to make comments in the comment area below. I will monitor them regularly and hope to engage you in a discussion. Otherwise, thank you for taking the time and have a nice day.